This webinar is about a topic that applies to attorneys in large law firms, but honestly, it should say something along the lines of why do the best attorneys work so hard and bill so many hours? And there's a lot of reasons for it. I'll talk about several of them today. One thing I would like you to consider, and this thought just occurred to me before getting started, is it's important always when you're asking questions about your career, what's happening, what's going on, to put yourself in the shoes of the people that may be controlling, this. If you ask yourself why attorneys in large law firms are billing a lot of hours, you may ask yourself, what would I want if I was a huge client with a lot of money to spend? Or what would I want if I was a law firm that needed to pay huge salaries to their partners in order to retain them so they don't go to other firms? Or what would I want if I was a law firm that needed to pay huge salaries to the best associates coming out of the best law schools in the most desirable practice areas if I was going to retain? The answer to that, of course, is that it's about you needing to work hard. From the client's perspective, they want, if they're spending very high billable hour rates on attorneys, doing all they can to cover their backs. That may mean many hours, and it often does mean a lot of hours and a lot of research and things that doesn't sound important. But if you're a corporation that's generating billions of dollars a year, it is very important. Nothing's more important than protecting yourself from errors. I can tell you that personally, having hired more attorneys than I can count in law firms over the past few decades, that when an attorney doesn't work hard on the matter and they miss things, it can be devastating and it can cost you millions, if not tens of millions of dollars. In my case, I've been in situations where I've lost $10 million or more because of bad attorney. And because the person that I trusted or the firm that I trusted didn't work hard in the matters because I wasn't a big company or whatever compared to the people they're used to working for. So attorneys work hard. And if you're a client, it's very important, obviously, that your attorney is working extremely hard on your matters, because if they don't, they miss things. And that's what wealthy people and wealthy companies expect from their attorneys, is they want to win. It's not just about pride, it's about money and business and protecting themselves. And so that's one reason attorneys work hard. So I just put it in the client's perspective. From the perspective, if you're an associate and you're working for partners, those partners are often compensated based on how many hours you bill to their clients. If you work hard for their clients and do very good work and bill a lot of hours, they make more money. If you do good work for their clients, are happier. Missing things and making mistakes is something that could cost those clients money. It could cost the attorney whose client it is business, and that's very harmful to them. So they need people that are working hard and researching and finding exceptions and so forth as well. And then from the standpoint of the firm needs you to bill a lot of hours too. Sometimes you're just institutional clients of the firm, but if you don't bill a lot of hours, it's very hard for the firm to pay your salary. It's very hard for the firm to pay the salaries of the partners, and that they often guarantee. It's very hard for the firm to pay for its very expensive, they typically have very expensive staff and very expensive offices. And in order to attract the best attorneys, they need to have you working a lot of hours. That's just how it is. It's very difficult for law firms as well. So it's not that the law firms are evil. The law firms are just trying to keep everything going. And because the partners expect money, their staff expects money, everybody expects stuff from everyone at every step of the way. And if you're an associate, for example, you're just part of it. And then from your perspective, why do you work so hard? Which I'll talk more about today, is a lot of times the attorneys are working hard because they're competitive with other attorneys in the firm for hours. It's really the only source of value you have to offer especially when you're a young attorney. It's the most you can contribute is your hours. You're not bringing in business. And so that's how you contribute. And then also you're learning, and you're part of an institution where you're learning. And large law firms hire people that have a history of working hard and high achievement. They want to hire people that got the best grades in law school, that maybe went to the best schools and have worked very hard their whole careers. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. And then after I talk about that, I will take as many questions as you have. This webinar, unfortunately, I don't think the an email went out about it. We have a lot of time to take questions today. If you have them, I'll to answer questions, anything about your career or anything else, any other questions you may have related to this webinar. But again, the entire law firm ecosystem is structured so that everyone inside of it is working as hard as they're capable of working and billing as much as they can. And in most cases, partners and other people don't stop working hard until they're fired, leave, die, go crazy, or retire. It's funny, I remember when I was in high school, I had a teacher that said when he was in college, he always had this nightmare that a lot of other people have, that he found out a day or two before an exam that he was enrolled in a class and he'd never been to the class, and there was a final exam in 2 days and he had to get ready for it. And this is an exam a nightmare that a lot of people have when they're in college and law school. And I've actually had the exam. That nightmare is recently, probably is a couple months ago. I can't remember, but so has that, a lot of people have that nightmare. But another nightmare people have is that they're in a law firm and all this time goes by, whether it's weeks or months, and they haven't billed any hours and they've been working on something else and they wonder what's going to happen. And that's how it works in law firms. Your currency is your hours. And so if you stop billing, then everything stops, and very quickly you in most cases will lose your job. Now, that's not always the case. A lot of law firms, if you stop billing and they're not giving you work, will let you stay there indefinitely because they think it's cheaper than getting sued. But it's not always the case. And as a matter of fact, it's generally not the case, but sometimes that's the case as well. So one of the things, the large law firms have clients willing to pay for attorneys to work long hours. All law firms, almost all of them, have major corporate clients, and these clients are not as sensitive to large bills and hours as smaller firms. These large clients want their attorneys to work very hard. If you work harder on an issue, you typically get a better result. Smaller law firms typically works for clients that are very sensitive to bills, so they don't have time to go into a lot of detail on issues and to make sure that they look at things in depth. And typically, the more prestigious the law firm, the better their clients, and the richer, more powerful the clients, and the richer and more powerful the clients, the more money they're willing to pay for the legal services without batting an eye. And they do that with high hourly rates but with a willingness to pay for lots and lots of hours. Typically, the more prestigious the law firm, the more willing the client is to pay for lots of hours, and not even. And in BCG, we rank firms from 1 to 5. The 1 tends to be your consumer-facing firms, and your 5 tend to be the largest and the most powerful firms with the largest, most least cost-sensitive clients. These 5 firms literally will allow people to be able to get bills sometimes for millions of dollars a month and just pay them. Whereas obviously that would never happen at a 1 firm, a 2 firm, or even a mid-sized firm, which would typically be like a 3 firm. What all this means, the largest, most prestigious firms typically also, these clients can afford to give them lots of legal work. When you think about the size of these clients, a lot of them are generating billions of dollars a year in revenue. And that revenue is just coming in. And in some cases, they have tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars sitting in bank accounts. So when that money comes in, they may review the bills, but they typically pay them promptly. And if there's legal matters, they turn on the tap and will give lots of legal work and without a lot of analysis. Now, that's not to say that firms don't get fired and make mistakes and get caught overbilling, but for the most part, they're willing to pay for a lot of work. And so you working, if you're an associate, working what you think is a lot of hours on something is not really, it makes a difference to the partner who's originated that client, if that's the case, but it's not something that is upsetting the clients in most cases. So a lot of times associates will feel like they're writing endless memos. They'll feel like they're working on litigation that makes no sense. It just keeps going. They don't understand. And the client's spending hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars per month. Partners might be making up countless drafts of deal documents, going back and forth with minuscule things that seem unimportant. And the large law firms finding work to be done, it looks like. Now, there's a lot of schools of thought of this, and I wanted to just bring this up to everyone that's watching this, because if you're a young associate and even a senior associate, you may be watching this and wondering, why is the law firm extending this litigation? Why are they overworking this deal. And a lot of key times, and if they're being sued and you're defending someone, or a lot of times when you're at the biggest firms, you're going up against smaller clients, and those smaller clients aren't as well funded. So the strategy is that you work harder and more on something, and eventually your financial might will pressure the other side into taking a bad settlement, or it will pressure the other side into not working as hard on a deal memo or whatever, and then your side will win. I was talking to a corporate attorney years ago, and he said something to me that I couldn't believe, and it was sad. He said that he's always representing these big companies that are buying, or big clients that are buying smaller companies, and he watches these smaller companies get bought but that are owned by a single person for tens of millions, or even more than that, than they're worth, tens of millions of dollars less than they're worth, because he has the ability to extract good terms from bad lawyers and stuff. And those entrepreneurs and things tend to use small firms and that sort of thing. And the same thing in private equity and all these other things. The bigger the law firm and better the attorney, the better deals they can get. And that often they do that by having the ability to pay lawyers a lot of money. And smaller law companies often cannot afford to do that. And they often don't pay their bills promptly. Large law firms won't tolerate that. Large law firms won't allow them to terms, or won't like it if they're told to not work hard on the matter, because they'll feel like they're not giving service that they're used to. And at those types of firms, as the clients aren't paying as much, you may not be working as many hours. And many times there's not enough work for you to even work that many hours at a lot of these smaller firms, because the clients aren't willing to pay for it. Again, I want to bring this point up because I do believe it's very relevant, and again, almost sad. But what dynamic in the legal profession, for the most part, is the big firms with a lot of money to spend will have the ability, with those resources and time and research and quality of attorneys, to walk all over smaller law firms without that money, time, and resources, and often to impress those firms with their pedigrees and their power. And it's sad. It's sad because what happens is lots of clients in the legal field do not get taken advantage of by more powerful people and more powerful law firms. And again, if you work for a smaller firm, you may be taken advantage of by larger firms a lot of times, and both in litigation and in transactions and all those sorts of things. And again, I watch this on a daily basis and see it, and it's more common than not common. Now, there's a lot of extremely good small firms or some incredible plaintiffs firms, but how are they always portrayed? They're portrayed as like renegades, breakaways. They're not a part of the mainstream, all this kind of stuff, but they're just sticking up for their clients. It's important to understand that. And again, when you work at a smaller firm or a firm that's not as prestigious as a lot of these large firms, you have to be very aware that you have to outthink the other side, and that the other side is expecting to take advantage of you and get a deal based on their resources. And frankly, there's a lot to that statement. I always clerked in a court and always watched bigger firms win based on the quality of their work and their persuasiveness, but also their work is a lot of times more trustworthy. You're expecting things to be right and not wrong. Smaller firms do not have the ability many times to overwork matters. And because of that, they may not get the best results. So what does that mean? If you're a litigator, it means that you as a large firm, you have the ability to research all sorts of different little points. And those little points that you research many times can turn whatever you have into a winning case. It means you have more time to write really good briefs and to rework them and to highlight the points better and to make them more persuasive. It means you have the time with the transactional attorney to insert all sorts of language that's not questioned by the other side that benefits your side, or penalties and other things that benefit your side and not the other side, and to spend a lot of time on things and then to go back with multiple drafts, all those sorts of things. And it's just how the system works. And fortunately, but it works this way in every part of the world, the richest get access to the best legal services, and they pay a lot of money for that. And they often work on things that's unnecessary, and they do other things. They'll get what are called private judges that they're connected to, and they'll do matters that way. Or they will go into arbitrators, where the arbitrators get all the work from the big firms, and so they'll give favor to the big firms because they're getting all the work from them as opposed to the smaller firms, and they know they'll get more recurring work. So all sorts of games are going on out there, and those with less money and resources do not get the same level of service, and more often than not get results that are not as good as the people with a lot of money and resources. It's just how it is. And I'm letting you know all this because if you want to be on the winning team, most of the time, a lot of time, it's going to be these larger firms. And there's also a benefit to working very hard on something. If you do nothing but work on one type of contract or one type of litigation all the time, you're going to know the ins and outs compared to a generalist. It's just, there's no other reason. And large law firms typically are made up of specialists, and the associates and partners and others inside the largest law firms that service the richest clients, they learn the system of work to question every detail in transactions and litigation, and they create the best work possible. Those associates and those partners are often more connected in the legal community. They're members of groups. They know they are members of councils that appoint judges and all sorts. They have the power to give money to judicial candidates. There's a million things that go on that people don't understand when they get into the legal profession about how these large law firms are able to dominate things. And I'm not making statements about this one way or another. If you make a large salary, you're probably able to do more than you can with a smaller salary. It's just how it is. If you have access to rich parents, you can do more than someone that doesn't. It's how capitalism works. And the largest clients expect the best work, and those hours, and the attorneys are expected to put them in. And companies that are paying top dollar for legal services expect this. They want to win. There's an interesting statement, and anyway, I'll just keep going, but it's just how it works. And the nice thing about large law firms that you learn there, this is part of kind of the training that you get, and I think it's a very powerful thing, the training, and I think it's very useful, is large law firms do not like errors in reasoning. They don't like bows. They don't like logic flaws that could have been fixed with more analysis and attention to detail and hours. So when you look at the work product, and again, this is one of the benefits many times of clerking, is you can see this stuff when you clerk, because you will look at the work product that comes in from different levels of law firms. And it's fascinating because the large law firms will, and I'm just telling you this as someone that clerked for a federal judge, and the largest law firms and the best law firms will turn in this work product that is very easy to read, and the citations are perfect, it looks good, it's on a well-known firm name letterhead, it reads it's been edited perfectly. You don't see typos and commas and errors, and it just looks very good. And the logic is good. The headlines of the subject headings are good. It's all understandable. The paragraphs are short and snappy, and they're just different types of work that you tend to get from a large firm many times than a smaller law firm. And again, it's not to say that all small law firms are like that, but it's just how it works just in the court system, for one example. But it works this way in transactional work and everything. And so the idea is that a firm will put in all these hours, and that's what you get. And so they have clients that are willing to pay. They want this type of work product, and it needs to be very good to justify the hourly rates and the hours that are spent in each matter. The idea is to, and I don't want to go into a lot of detail on this, but typically what happens is, especially in the large law firms, is there's always an outside counsel, whether it's an assistant general counsel or someone in the office of the legal department, that's reading and looking over the work that the large law firm is doing. And many times, and I'm not criticizing house counsel, but they can get lazy and tired and stuff because they're not really practicing law a lot of times anymore, but not all of them, of course. And that's a generalization that's probably unfair, but what they do is they'll read this work product, and they may not understand everything, but if they see a typo, they'll circle it, and that will be a really bad thing. And they'll be like, well, you're trying to work with a typo. So the idea is that the typos and the mistakes and the things you typically don't see in the large law firms, because the idea is that if there's these mistakes, then the logic of what's going in, the thought process behind it, the in-house counsel definitely need to understand all the time. The general counsel doesn't need to understand 15 different areas of law, but they do understand what a typo looks like. And they understand this. Big law firms will turn in stuff that looks perfect, and not all the time, but almost all the time. And the logical flaws and the reasoning and stuff as well. So you look at that and many times, and that's one of the ways to justify the fees. And again, the large law firms aren't paying, the large companies are not paying these fees because it's stupid and wasteful. By paying their attorneys to overwork cases, they're able to extract better settlements. They're able to extract in transactions better terms because they're going up against people with less money, and they're thinking through matters much more closely. And the work is often very high stakes. Again, a lawsuit could involve hundreds of millions of dollars, if not more. A transaction could be a merger of $2 billion companies. A real estate matter could be a REIT or something with tons of skyscrapers and stuff in a single portfolio. And so most people want to work, not all people, but a lot of people want to work on these more important matters. And if you're working on those more important matters, it requires less room for error, less room to make mistakes, and you have to do better. And the associates and partners who work on these sorts of matters make more money because the clients have the money to spend. The clients are successful. The clients have built these businesses that have become big companies, or the company, someone has started some group or someone along the way has started a very successful company. Most companies fail, and they've started a successful company, and they're willing to pay for the best. And that's what they expect from you. And that's one of the things. The other thing is there's a belief system in large law firms, and they have a belief system that has the attorneys work as hard as they can. So despite the existence of lots of work from corporate clients, none of this would work if there wasn't this sort of belief system that became part of them once they started working in the largest law firms. The largest law firms they have standards, and they have acceptable behavior and unacceptable behavior and all these things that are happening that make a certain type of attorney. And other attorneys don't even need to tell other attorneys that they need to work hard. It's simply understood. And again, there's two phases to this. There's what associates believe and what partners believe. And there's generally in most law firms, there's a brainwashing phase, and that lasts 1 to 10 years. And then there's what I call the zombie phase, which is when an attorney becomes a partner and their personality almost becomes unrecognizable. And it's very funny, by the way. It's the people become not the same as they were before they went to law school, even their first year or so out of law school. So here's how it works. This is the brainwashing phase. This is where a whole set of beliefs start to be implanted in the new attorney. And the gist of it, and this can take anywhere from 3 to 12 years, but essentially what's happening is the attorney will start to feel completely worthless if they're not, meaning their self-esteem will be low, they'll feel guilty, they'll feel there's a problem if they're not sitting somewhere in an office or at home and in front of a computer billing, developing business, or working in a conference room very late at night. It's just their self-worth is tied to this sort of work. Now, many people's self-worth, I don't want to be critical of this because it's this sort of brainwashing phase occurs among great athletes where they're expected to be practicing. It occurs among religions when you're expected to go to church and give a percentage of your income or to abide by certain dietary restrictions. And if you don't do that, I know people that are very religious in different religions, and they are brainwashed. They follow a certain regimen, and that's what they do. They don't eat certain foods. They may be in a service every morning and group every after. I mean, it's just how it works. And this is what happens. It happens in different types of businesses. There's certain types of businesses that also have there's a brainwashing phase in the medical profession. So again, I'm not saying that the law firms are evil having a brainwashing phase, but it's what they do. And they may have, but the way this is transformed, and it's very funny, but it's what it is. They become, in a lot of these large firms, someone who may have formerly been very interested in the outdoors and spending a lot of time with their family and friends, to someone who feels the most comfortable and even alive when they're doing work-related activities that can be recorded as billable hours. This is how this becomes their identity. Whereas before, their identity might have been, I don't know, going to rock concerts or something, who knows, but their identity changes because this is where they're spending all their time. This is where they're getting negative feedback. This is where they're getting the money to provide for their family. And this is just what happens. And it can happen slowly or shortly, but It happens. So it's funny for whatever reason. It's not for whatever reason, but I remember growing up with friends that had parents that worked in large law firms. And if I went over to their house on a Saturday or a Sunday, most of the time the parent was at work, but if they weren't at work, they were at home working. They were sitting, reading things and doing things, billing hours during the weekend. Certainly, that's not to say they worked all weekend, but that's what they would do. And it's just how it works. It's how it works among attorneys. When I was practicing law, if I go into the office on Sunday, it would be majority of people there. So it's just how it works. People get their self-worth from it, and it's what the large law firm inculcates. And most attorneys, by the way, when they go into large law firms, they'll realize what's happening and that this is what the emphasis is. And they will get sick of it and they'll say, I want to go in house, or I want to do something else. I don't want to be part of this. And they leave. And they leave because I don't know why they leave, but many people leave for different reasons. And I would go so far as to say that certain people from certain backgrounds will never make it. If you grew up in a very healthy environment and where I'm saying healthy and not a way that the opposite is unhealthy, but in certain types of environment where your family and the time with your family was emphasized, or you're, I don't know, practicing your religion or sports all the time, I don't know, but you may not make it. I don't know. And at the same part, if you grow up in an environment in which most attorneys, a lot of them do, when they go to law school, where achievement was the only thing that mattered and where you were relying on others for self-worth, or where you were expected to do things, then I don't know. It's just there's different types of people that fall into this. And again, I don't think it's bad to fall into it. I don't think it's bad to become obsessed with sports or bad to be a doctor and work all the time. But there is a certain level of kind of brainwashing that occurs. And I want to add a few more things about how this brainwashing works, because I think it's very important to understand what's happening to you and what's happened to you when you go into a firm and how they're brainwashing you, because it is important to understand the mechanism. So the first mechanism is if you bill a lot of hours, you're given positive feedback. The positive feedback is almost many times when you're a young attorney will just be very positive. Now, if everybody's billing a lot of hours and you bill even more, you will be maybe not get as positive feedback, but you will get positive feedback. One story I've told a lot on these webinars, but I think is very funny, is I was the first firm I quit, and they quit. They came in and they were talking to me about staying and asking me why I was quitting and all this stuff. And I said, this person that I was very close with, was helping me, didn't make partner and someone else did. And I was upset about it. They said, the person that didn't make partner only billed 2,800 hours last year. The person that did billed 3,200. Now think about that. Wow. So one person doesn't make partner and leaves because of a 400-hour difference. I don't know if that was the whole thing, but it was a junior partner that said this to me. So I'm sure there was more that went into it than that, but that was what he interpreted was the most important thing, was the hours. That's one form of brainwashing. Another form of brainwashing that happens is attorneys will be absolutely torn apart when they're young for simple mistakes and things like that. And it was very funny. I remember I've told this story in webinars too, so if you've heard this before, forgive me. But I was sitting next to a first-year associate in the second firm I went to. And by that point, I think I was a third-year associate. And this partner, there were some other first years, like this multiple floors of an office building, but this first year, this partner would go in and yell at this associate periodically, like once every two months or so, and be very visibly mad when he walked in and visibly mad when he walked out. And then when he would walk out, the associate would be very upset and then start working all the time, late at night and in the morning. And it got to the point where he actually bought himself an espresso machine, which was large, for his office and put it in there. And I was like, what's going on? What is this? What? And he said he was trained, I'm not even going to name it the firm, but it was a huge firm, like another major, it was a big, very big New York, LA firm, but a very well-known, like huge. And it's like, that's what they do to the associates at this firm. And that's what he was trained to do. And he was the guy that was supposed to do with all the associates. He goes in there and basically takes apart their work and shows them what's wrong with it and makes them feel badly. And then they improve a little and then he comes back and does the same thing. And he was doing this to all the first-year associates in the class. This is a form of brainwashing, making you paranoid about your work and all that sort of thing. Very interesting, I think, in a lot of respects, how that works. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to find my slideshow here. Give me one second. And that's a form of brainwashing. And there's other things too. There's bonuses associated with getting more hours, publicizing who got a higher bonus for hours. There's just a bunch of things. There's people getting favoritism and given work from the most important partners. If they do good work and work a lot of hours, given more and more work, and the people that aren't doing the best work, not given work. So these are all components of brainwashing that turns people into dependent on the firm for a feedback, for happiness, for support, for money, for all these sorts of things. And that's what happened. And what happens to a lot of people. And again, I'm not being critical of this because this is what the law firms do to institute a certain type of loyalty to their system and everything. And just think about, what does the military do? And the military, what do the Green Berets do, or the Navy SEALs? They all have different forms of brainwashing people to make them. Fraternities do the same thing in colleges and sports teams. So but this is what law firms do. And it's what they've always done. And since they've been large law firms, and they need to do that. Now, once someone's been successfully brainwashed, they become what I call a zombie. And again, I don't say this in a pejorative sense, but an attorney, in order to become partner, they need to be recognizable as someone that is a zombie. And the zombie is someone that will follow orders, where all this is the most important stuff in the world to them, where they will buy into all this, and where it looks like they're committed. And so these are some of the ideas that they need to buy into. If you work hard and do a great job, we'll make you a partner. So the brainwashed attorney needs to believe that if they're among the hardest working young attorneys, that they'll be made partner. Now, this can mean different things at different firms. That some firms, being among the hardest working attorneys, would be unbelievable. Like, you would not believe how hard they have to work. At others, not as much. But you have to buy into that belief. And a young attorney knows that they don't understand what's involved in being a partner. And being a partner is many things involved. It's learning to horse trade with partners about clients and work. And there's so many things involved to be a partner. It's not even distinguishable, and it's not even analogous in many cases to being an associate. But young attorneys learn to advance, they need to work as hard as they possibly can, and to throw themselves into their jobs and give their jobs everything they have. And law firms make that attractive by having huge profits per partner for equity partners. They make it attractive by making their partners, giving them larger offices and all that sort of thing. But attorneys will give their jobs everything they have many times, and they're young and don't realize that you're only young once, and they often will give all their time to a law firm with abandon without thinking through what they're doing. I want to tell a quick story here, and I don't want to offend anyone, so I'm not even going to say the sex of the person, whether it was a male or female or whatever. But I remember I had a candidate once that went into to interview in a big firm, and I don't remember it was in a big city, but I don't remember which one. And the candidate was told, look, like, you're very vibrant. I think they said attractive. And again, I'm not gonna say it was a man or woman. And really, with all this vibrancy and stuff, might do better not practicing law in a big firm, especially here, because it's just going to drain your soul and all this kind of thing. This is what a partner said to the person interviewing. And you should maybe find a profession where those sorts of things will be rewarded. Now, is that true? No, I don't think it's true, because I know plenty of people that are attractive and vibrant and happy in major law firms and are able to make and actually become more vibrant in large law firms. But this is what the person said to them. And to some extent, if you are not if you're not cut out for this, then it can drain you. And it's the all-nighters, it's the weekends, and the idea that you're going to go somewhere positive with all this is what people are buying into. And that's unfortunately not the case. The truth is that most people will never make partner in large law firms where they're working. Most will leave voluntarily after working extreme hours for several years. Now, is that the right thing to do? Many times, and I just want to put this out there because it's true, the people that stick around and don't leave are the ones that make partner. And so just leaving is not the smartest thing to do. It's often the dumbest. It's like you walk away from something right when you're going to have success, And so everyone is around you is telling you to leave. So I do not think that this whole idea of leaving is always the smartest thing to do. If a law firm starts with 50 first-year associates, there might only be 3 or 4 left after 8 or 9 years, but those 3 or 4 might all have a good run for a partner. And maybe out of those 3 or 4, out of those 50, the majority or substantial majority or all of them weren't fired. They just left voluntarily. So sticking around, and when you say the large law firms don't make partners, it's just not always true. It's just that a lot of people leave. But the job becoming a partner does have a lot more to do in a lot of firms than how many hours you build when you were an associate. And I want to put some stuff out there. I don't want to offend anybody. I've been in, I don't know, anyway, the kind of conversations that go on when people are deciding who they're going to make a partner, a lot of times have a lot more to do with other things than just the hours you bill. It could be your personality. Do they think you're someone that they want out there representing their firm? Do you look like a representative and act like a representative of the firm? So even if you're sitting in an office billing a lot of hours, that doesn't mean you may look and act like a representative of your firm, which is one reason in my talks and things that I tell people, take care of yourself, look your best, act your best. I'm not making statements about your weight or anything, but I'm just saying you have to try to be dressed well, when you look like a representative, look like the kind of person you would want to hire. And that means a lot of things to different people, but it may mean some men will all wear bow ties, or I don't know, but you want to look a certain way, meaning you want to look like the type of attorney that you would want to hire. And that can mean different things to different people. For in Silicon Valley, it can be wearing a t-shirt and have a huge beard, and people would think you're cool, and that would get you hired, but that may not work in other markets. It's just, so you have to, whatever it is that you want to portray is really something that the law firm is going to think positively about. I heard, anyway, and then not only that, but then you have to be someone that's liked and other things. But the thing that's interesting is that a lot of times the partners that, in addition to the hours, you have to look like someone that may be able to bring in business in the future. You have to be able to get along with other people. So you can't just be cliquey and on the wrong side of a click. You have to have a sponsor that has power. And typically those are people with lots of hours that are willing to get behind you. All these sorts of things are important. It depends on the firm, but it's not just hours. And I just want to make that clear. And a lot of partners jump from ship to ship each year. And so the young attorney, the people you're working for, may not even be around by the time you become a partner. And so other than the quality of your work, you get a lot of times young attorneys don't even have much more to distinguish themselves when they're young than the number of hours they give to their firms. And so this energy that you have, and energy is hours, and your ability to think through problems is hours, what you have at this stage. And it's how you can distinguish yourself early on. And so people build those hours, believing it'll help them become partners. And honestly, it works. So you have to build a lot of hours, and that's how you'll be evaluated, because your hours are your financial contribution to the firm prior to becoming your ability to work hard and to set an example that makes other associates believe that they have to work hard, and then that kind of rises all tides. So if you're an associate and you're billing 3,000 hours a year and everyone around you is billing 1,600, that's not good. They're going to all, especially if you're getting all the most important work, they're going to pick up their game. So this is how it works. And if you work hard and you're working those kind of hours, it's also something where you are probably doing it because you like, and again, not always, but you like getting praised, and you've always thrived on that from teachers, schools, and others people for doing good work and so forth. And your ego is stroked by that, and your self-esteem may come from doing a good job and succeeding, or you may just be wired to do this well, and it doesn't matter to you one way or another, your self-esteem, but a lot of times it does. And so if hours are needed to do that, young attorneys will often work these hours to succeed. Law firms will often reinforce this belief system by giving the best reviews to attorneys who bill the most hours, and so forth. And one of the issues too is, again, that there is a prejudice in the legal profession, and it's always been like this. And it's funny. Years ago, I'm not even going to get into that, but because BCG advertises so much, we will say we're looking for a first-year attorney or second-year attorney and all this sort of stuff. And we've actually been contacted before by government agencies and stuff in Washington, D.C. about these job postings as if they're age-based and stuff. And it's not funny, I guess. It's not good. But the idea is that and it didn't go anywhere. But the point is that government agencies are very sensitive to this kind of stuff. And we're not the people hiring them, the law firms are. But the idea is that when an attorney gets more senior, typically an attorney that's very young is coming out of the gate. They're like a young puppy that's trying to get attention or whatever, and they're willing to work very hard. And then they know, and law firms know, that once an attorney gets more than 5 or 6 years of experience, unless they're close to being partner or something, they're going to be less likely to work very hard. So there's a prejudice against younger attorneys. They do like third, fourth, and fifth years that are 3 or 4 years away from partner, but they can, as long as a law firm can realistically hold the prospect of a partnership up for you, if you bill a lot of hours, they're going to get a lot of work out of everyone there, and they want people that want to be partner and so forth. I've had instances before where I've had incredibly talented candidates. I had one, it was funny, I had a candidate that had a PhD in electrical engineering from Stanford, I believe, or it was Stanford or MIT or something. And there's just not a lot of people like that out there. And not only that, but they were at a massive, like very well-regarded firm, and they wanted to move to another firm. And as part of this, they said, hey, that's great, but I'm excited to maybe work with this firm, but I don't want to be a partner. And the firm was like, how could you not want to be a partner? And so the firm, and this person had 5 or 6 years of experience, and the firm said, there's no way we would hire someone who doesn't want to be a partner. That would upset our whole balance and demotivate everyone else here. So they didn't hire this person, even though they were just an incredible candidate with these great degrees and work experience, and very interesting. So large law firms will hire people if they can ascertain that the person still is going to be willing to work crazy hours, that they're motivated by this, and that going to often abandon this with no regard for their social life, family, all this sort of stuff. And this is what it takes. Now, I'm not saying, again, I don't want to sound prejudiced against large law firms, because I'm not. And this is no different than saying that all football players have to be really fit and be able to do, or it's just how it works. But large law firms expect people to be a certain way. And I meet these brainwashed attorneys all the time. And again, I don't want to be too critical of all this, because it's no different than saying I meet a boxer who's got huge muscles or whatever. But a lot of times the people look like they would look like a pirate or something. Their teeth are often dark, their skin's bad, and they don't look healthy. Often the hair's falling out in different places. And again, no problem with that, and they just often, intermittently smell like alcohol. Who knows? But it's just that it can be, for a lot of people, not the right decision to make. And then as they get older, they become far less likely to put in humane hours, because they believe often there's little point in doing so. Now, these are for the people that lose. So the people that lose, again, when you meet partners in a lot of these very good New York firms, they are polished, they have it together, they work hard, but they manage to, then big firms, they figured it out, and they're certainly not that, but they often will not stick with it if they don't make it past this stage. And so law firms often do not want to hire attorneys if they're brainwashed. They want people that are younger, and they also, the last thing in the world they want many times is to hire an attorney that's left a law firm and wants to come back. That is not good. They will typically not do that. The problem with leaving a law firm, by the way, people leave and go in-house, they leave and do all these other things, but when they come back, they often don't like it. They don't understand. They've seen something else. It doesn't work for them, and it's a law firm, and they just don't want to be there anymore. And this is really what happens most of the time. So if you go in-house, the law firm, you typically will not stay in the law firm. Law firms have had so many bad experiences hiring people from in-house that if they're in a major legal market with lots of applicants, they won't hire someone from in-house. Now, if you're in-house, that's not to say you can't get back in a law firm, but it's going to be very difficult in major legal markets when the law firms have other options. Now, major legal markets means that there's a lot of people applying to those jobs. That could be Chicago, it could be Miami, New York, Washington, D.C. But so that's the problem with in-house. If you're trying to go in-house in a smaller market, or trying to go from in-house to a law firm in a smaller market, it can work, especially if you have very good experience. But most law firms will avoid it. And most attorneys that go in-house and go back to law firms never stick around. And so law firms, and whether or go to a government agency and do other things, a lot of times won't stick around either. It's just how it works. And if you leave all of this kind of conditioning that happens, this brainwashing and paranoia and so forth, goes away. And a lot of times these attorneys are just never hired again by large law firms. Young attorneys in the largest law firms who typically succeed in a lot of things, everything they've done, standardized tests, college and law school, and managed to get a position with a prestigious firm. And this makes them believe when they're young that they can also make partner. And it offers them even more prestige and income than they're currently making. And accustomed to high achievement, these attorneys will often push themselves to do whatever it takes until they either realize it makes no sense or success is possible if they apply themselves. One of the things that's very interesting, and I just want to add this, is there is a certain level of confidence that comes from a lot of people and that they just have naturally. They believe in themselves, they believe success is possible, and because of that, they do succeed. And I've noticed this a lot of times and I'll just throw this out there, attorneys from some of the best law schools like Harvard, Yale, Stanford, and things like that will just believe that they're going to succeed. It doesn't matter. And so they don't give up. And a lot of times the people that give up just don't have as much confidence. And I don't know if the law school gives them the confidence. I don't know if it's the strength to get into that kind of law school that gives them the confidence. I don't know what it is, but I've noticed that there's often a lot more confidence from those people. Not always. And that's not to say that lower level law schools, you don't get as much confidence, but that there's a certain level of confidence. So people believe that success is possible if they apply themselves. I remember I had this advisor once, and when I was younger, or actually when I was in high school, and this guy was talking about just these incredible things that, like when you get to college, you'll be doing this and that, and you're going to go to one of these. And I couldn't believe the stuff he was saying. I was like, how is that even possible? And this was a guy that had gone to, I think, Yale and all these great schools. But this was a way of thinking. And so there's a certain type of thinking that very successful people have, that where they just talk themselves into believing that whatever happens to them is going to happen, or they're going to be successful. I've noticed this with the most successful people I've hired that have done well. I've noticed this with the wealthiest people, the most successful people. They just have a way of talking to themselves that they're going to be successful, and there's no question about it. And if you get one thing out of this webinar, it would be that if you can do that type of a positive self-talk and really believe it, it's not just enough to say to myself, I'm going to be successful. You have to actually believe it, then you will be. And I don't know where that comes from, but it's a very important thing. And hopefully you can learn that. But I've just seen some people become really successful with that sort of thought process. They just it's not even a question that they're going to fail. They don't quit, they don't give up, they don't doubt themselves, and that just carries them right through. And I think that's something that a lot of people are missing. And if you have that, good. If you don't, it's something that hopefully you can develop. But there's a lot of books about it. There's Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. There was, this new thought movement that Christian Science and all these different things were based on, started out of it. But just believing in something and what you can, and again, this is not a religious discussion here, but I'm just saying that I think The Secret is based on something like that. I haven't watched that in 15 years, but that sort of thing can be helpful. So the fear of making small mistakes often drives people to work long hours. Most law firms, I was never told to overbill by any firm I was ever at. I was never told to bill more hours or encouraged to lie or anything, and most law firms, I don't believe, are unethical. And I don't think associates are really told that. You may have been told that, but I doubt it. Most law firms, especially large law firms, I believe, are very ethical about that sort of stuff. But it's often, there's a fear of kind of making small errors that young attorneys learn early on, and that makes them work tons of hours on every assignment. So I used to, if I wrote a letter to a client, the letter itself might take me like 2 hours if it was like longer, 3 hours, but then I would spend another 10 hours making sure it was perfect. And that's just how it works. Young attorneys are taught to be very paranoid about making small mistakes, because if they do, this can give negative remarks to the partner. People learn very early on that when you show people a draft of something, it better be close to perfect. It's not a draft. It's not something with typos and mistakes and not thought through and no citations. It's it's done. And when they review young attorneys, they'll often tell them that you need to be more thorough, pay more attention to detail. And if they say that, that means a lot of times that you're rushing your assignments, or it could be maybe that you're doing assignments that and you're not spending enough time on them and could be billing more hours. And if a law firm doesn't feel like you're billing a lot of hours, then all they need to do many times to get them to bill more hours is to say, pay more attention to detail and similar things. And suddenly you'll find yourself sitting in a chair working very hard. If you're asked to do that, is one way that the law firms will get you to do that. And this, every time they say that, they can probably get extra time out of those attorneys for a while. So pay more attention to detail is basically saying, if it's said enough, that you can spend more time on stuff, or maybe this should be researched in more depth. Maybe you can do this and that, and that's what the law firm's looking for. And this is just kind of a joke there, but the more times they say it, the more times more the attorney will work. So again, if you can see attorneys, and you probably watch this in your practice, and you've seen attorneys that make small mistakes. And one thing that I noticed is when people are confronted with mistakes, small things, the attorney will often get flushed or very upset and fix the error immediately, become even more paranoid, and so forth. And this is just a process that happens to attorneys a lot of times in firms when they learn how incredibly thorough their work needs to be. And they're made to be just really upset about the error and realize the next time they need to work hard and bill more hours and put in extra time to avoid such an inconsequential error. This is, by the way, these sort of characteristics in terms of turning in perfect work and not making errors and are really something that is expected by the clients, and is the difference between kind of what the product that a big firm attorney often will produce, and one of the reasons that they're often much more valuable to companies and to firms when they learn those skills compared to other practice settings. And again, these sorts of things, partners have been saying that the new set of attorneys isn't as detail-oriented, it doesn't work as hard, and so forth. And they're saying it now. They were saying it 10 years ago. They were saying it before then. So they've always been saying it. But I think it's just part of the dynamic of kind of what happens. But pointing out inconsequential errors is just a way to get people to become very paranoid, to work long hours, and making sure that more drafts are done, more hours are billed, and things are turned in that are done. And again, the biggest, and this is a long-winded discussion about this, but it is very important. The whole idea is that if you are turning in work with a lot of mistakes and things that are, and then the idea is that the logic of what you're writing hasn't been thought through. And then if that hasn't been thought through, then maybe your legal conclusions and so forth are wrong. And let's see. Yeah. This is a statement here. I was once working in a law firm with an associate billing well over 3,000 hours. He pulled all nighters at least a few days a week. He could barely write a page or brief without a few glaring errors in it. I can't remember this. And I could honestly not believe he graduated from law school and puzzling had anything to do at all. He was given a talented paralegal that sat right outside his door in his secretary station to proofread every document that turned. I do remember that guy was working very hard. He was also very smart, and the job was all about writing. This is just about errors. I'm not going to talk too much more about it, but if a memo takes 20 hours to research and write, to polish it correctly, it may take another 40 to 50 hours many times. And so this is just kind of how things work. And then the other thing is that attorneys that work the hardest will often keep their jobs. The people that are working the most hours are often the ones that are billing the most hours. And if you're not billing a lot of hours, this just brings negative attention to you. Lots of times partners will get lists of the hours all the attorneys and the associates billed the previous month. Are sortable like spreadsheets or on computers now. And attorneys, law firms certainly have lots of competition for the jobs that they have. And if you're not working hard and dedicated, you're costing the firm money and they can bring in people that are. Let's see here. One other thing I wanted to bring out about hours, and this is another important point, is the whole idea of seeking out work. There's kind of two ways, and this is a very important point about hours and why hours are important. And this is maybe the longest conversation you ever have about hours, but it may be the most important. Or talk you ever hear about hours, but there's two kind of schools of thought to hours. The first is that attorneys are expected to create work. And so creating work means if you have a client and you're doing matters for that client, you don't just complete the work for the client and say, here's your work, and then go your own way. Like you come back to the client and said, I did this, but this and this and this needs to be done. And that's how law firms make money. They don't make money when people only show up when they have work to do. They make money when extra work is suggested. So when you're an associate, having the ability to come up with extra types of work that can be done is something that's appreciated by partners, and you need to have that as well. The other thing about getting work in law firms is being able to seek out work. Being able to go get work is no different than what a partner has to do. Partners have to get work from their clients. And so if you're able to do that from partners who are your clients, they will also appreciate that as well. And if you can't get work from the other partners in your firm and people aren't giving you work and you aren't creating work after you get work, then you're certainly never going to be able to do that internally as well. A lot of times when people are laid off, law firms will always generally favor laying people off without who are, and this is important, this particular point in history to understand this, law firms will often lay people off that aren't billing a lot of hours, and the ones that are billing a lot of hours will be kept around. There's reasons for that, but the whole idea is that the people that are billing a lot of hours are probably doing good work because they're probably seeking out work and they're probably creating work. And all those things are the reason that hours are such a good measure of that. And law firms, when I talk to people that are laid off, which is often, they will say if they're doing poorly, they'll often say they only managed to bill a certain number of hours. And that's just kind of how it works. Big firms and small firms obviously have different standards. Okay, and this is just another message that law firms give work to, but that they give more work to people they like, they give work to people they like if you do a good job. This is part of the brainwashing, and hours are bestowed upon those who are the most worthy. Partners only give work to people that they like and do good work, and withhold work from people they don't like and don't do good work. In any large law firm, the worst thing that can happen is you cannot be given work. It's interesting too, I wanted to bring this point up because there's been a lot of talk about recessions. We're coming out with a state of the market report very shortly, and we'll do a webinar on that. But when you talk about recessions, a lot of times people are very busy during good economies, but they don't do the best work they can, or they resent getting work. And then when the economy slows down, it's the people that did the best work and were the most formed relationships and so forth during a good economy that are able to keep their jobs. And the ones that didn't are the ones that don't. Getting lots of assignments and work means you're pleasing the people that you're getting the work from and doing good work. And honestly, the people that are the best are typically given work. It's a sign of love and approval at the largest law firms. And in order to feel good about yourself and to be doing well, you want to be getting a lot of work. Okay, and then the idea is too is if you make mistakes, you make up for them by working harder. So people will be criticized in reviews, and the way you can often make those up is by working even harder. And so if you're talked too badly in a review or people say bad things about your performance, really the best way to do that and extend your survival is to work hard. What happens typically, I did want to talk a little bit about the review cycle. In large law firms, junior associates, meaning your first and second year, if there isn't a huge threat of them jumping ship and going to other firms, are typically, meaning the economy is doing very well. If the economy is doing okay or not badly, then typically what happens is junior associates are given reviews that encourage them to work harder and are harsh and not as good. As they get more to be mid-levels, third, fourth, and fifth year, the reviews get very good because they want you to stick around. You're profitable. You know what you're doing. You don't require a lot of supervision. And then as you get closer to being a partner, they can often become a little discouraging again because they're trying to get people to leave. They don't want to stick around, don't have the guts to keep going. Here's another thing. It's just if you're working very hard, many times you believe that others should too. So people are social animals. And so in large law firms, if you're not working hard, other people do, then you're considered out, and then you're not out of it. The first firm I worked at, the entire firm was almost always there on Sundays. One of the founders of the firm would always walk around to the different floors and pop in and see who was there. And they knew he would be walking around at some point. So obviously people would be in the office or others working. There's a lot of peer pressure in many firms to show that they're all working as well. All right. Again, this is a review. I talked about that previously. And then let's see here, the reviews. And then this is another threat. You'll lose your current lifestyle if you do not throw yourself to work. What does happen, and this is something that I would caution you against, is a lot of times after they've been working for a year or two, suddenly you can afford houses and all these sorts of things. And so people will often go buy these things. They'll buy houses, they'll get married, and they'll start accumulating all sorts of expenses. Maybe a significant other will decide to stay at home. Who knows? And so you suddenly all these things will start happening where you'll lose your freedom. And then when you lose your freedom, you will be more dependent on the law firm. It was very funny. I remember I had a good friend who came from a professional family of other attorneys. And they were like, you never tell the firm anything about buying a house, never tell them anything about, because once you do that, the firm will believe that they have power over you, and that's not what you want them to. And I thought that was very funny, but it is true. That can happen to people. And once you have enough expenses and you build up a lot of expenses, it's very difficult to leave your position. And then you become dependent on the firm and you have to stay. And this is where people get into a lot of trouble. And so I want to caution you, especially if you're an attorney, to watch that. You're better off having a nest egg. It's not something you want to do. In the long run. Another thing I don't like is a lot of times attorneys do not have other skills other than being an attorney. They do feel you can go to law school as a liberal arts major, whereas you might make 1/3 or 5th or 6th or 7th of what you would as an attorney coming out. And with those disciplines, going to law school suddenly gives you all sorts of ways to make money. And then you realize that there's not much you can do other than working in a large law firm. And so with no other skills, you may have no choice but to throw yourself into a firm. Other attorneys become firm snobs. This is very common among people from large firms. And so they believe that they need to stay in these large law firms for their self-esteem. I'm sure people like that, the way they talk about firms. And that's another way that you can kind of become a slave to the billable hour. Your professional identity, in many cases, your self-worth may become tied with working for a law firm that gives you the most social, professional standing in the legal community. People carry this with them their entire careers. I watch it to this day among senior attorneys. I find it amusing, but again, it's a way that you have to watch out for that. And then I'm almost done with this webinar, but there's a shortage. Most attorneys are expendable in the largest law firms. And so because of that, in most cases, unless you're there's very few attorneys in your practice area, or there's an undersupply of attorneys, most law firms can find people to replace you. It's not always the case, and it's not always the case in all economies. It's certainly not the case in all markets. So if you're in a smaller market, it's not the case, but most attorneys are expendable. And if you're not willing to do this, law firms can find people to replace you. And that is something that also works. Law firms, often people that, and does affect many cases of treatment. When you're in a large law firm and you're working for someone and they've seen multiple people come and go, and maybe in your office, you might be in an office where there's been 4 or 5 separate attorneys over the past decade. It's that the partners even that have been doing this for a long time know you're expendable, believe you'll leave at some point, and don't like that either. Okay, let's see here. This is the zombie phase, and I don't want to go too far into this, but in most cases, a zombie is just someone that kind of becomes a billing machine for the rest of their career. They're often partners. And then when they're unable to find sufficient work, if they can, they stay, and they only leave when they can't find work. They're constantly billing, and they look at everything as different types of time, whether it's working on business development or billing hours. When you call them, they often pick up the phone because they believe it's billable time. It's funny, you pick up the phone and try to call a lot of the most successful attorneys in the country. They'll pick right up, and then you get right in. Many times believe that it's related to business, clients, associates, everything becomes a priority, and they start thinking about billing. It's just how it works. And then even party and social invitations are analyzed based on whether they can be billed, and then other organizations are joined based on whether or not they believe they can get business. Articles are written based on things that sound ridiculous, but if they can find clients interested in that, that's good. Many times their fellow partners are very boring. It's funny if you've ever been to lunch with some of them, and again, they're not all like this, but a lot of them are not pretty boring. And again, the problem is as you become a zombie, which is a partner, many law firms will pay the partners as little as they can for their business, the hours they bill, and then work as hard as they can. And it's just a whole cycle of exploitation. The only point I want to make to you is that as an associate, you may feel like you're exploited, but partners probably feel even more exploited many times by their firms than associates. I've had instances where I've called up partners and I've talked to them, and they've been making 5 times less than they should. And it's just very interesting, how law firms hold on to partners. They typically will use compensation and other things, but many times the most powerful partners will fight over money and other sorts of things. And this is just some stuff about partners getting paid and how they move to new firms, many times saying that they have a lot of business when they don't. So a zombie relies on the brand of the firm for prestige. A lot of times large law firms and the zombies inside of large law firms will get their standing based on the quality and brand of their firms. They think very highly of their brands, and they often will measure their self-worth based on those brands and stick around for fear of going to a lesser brand or only go to a higher brand. They will often feel a real privilege to be working in such a good firm, and they'll work as hard as possible to justify working there. So in large law firms, there's all sorts of people that are in pseudo partner roles, that are in all these different sort of roles where they're really sticking around just because it's important to them to be in a really good firm, because they've always defined themselves based on that, and will often never consider going to a lesser firm. And then these same people will talk about how people at lesser firms are incompetent and other sorts of things. And a lot of self-worth comes from that, and then how they compare themselves to attorneys in other firms. And so it's just, again, I don't want to get too far into this, but it's something that kind of can exist in the long run for a lot of other attorneys as well throughout their career. The idea here is that I also talked about this kind of interesting. I can call attorneys in their late 50s or early 60s, or even send an email about a job opportunity or something. And if it's with a more prestigious firm, a lot of times these attorneys will be interested more often than not. Whereas if it's a less prestigious firm, they would never think about it. So it's all about status a lot of times. Again, not all the time. These are generalizations that in many cases are quite unfair, but it's just how that works. This is just a couple of points about the zombie and the brand of the firm to attract clients. The zombies believe that clients should come to them because of the brand of the firm. Many times, often not anything to do with them, which is kind of interesting. Let's see here. And then they feel obligations, other zombies. Okay, there we go. Let's see. And then often transaction costs. This is all based on an article. This is just a lot of information to cover, and I don't know that it makes sense to cover all of this. A lot of this is very similar to what attorneys do, but the associates do. But idea is that as a partner in a law firm, all the characteristics that you are brainwashed with as an associate become even more pronounced many times when you become a partner. And the prestige of the firm, the salary, the name, all this stuff, people do not want to lose that, and they become even more beholden to it. So it's almost like the whole idea of handcuffs and so forth. And then these are some of the conclusion. There's different stages of it. And often this is what large law firms do. And again, there's no criticism of large law firms here. It's just how this particular business works. So I'll take a quick break of just a minute or two. I apologize, it's a long webinar, but it is a important topic. And I think a lot of the stuff we covered earlier was good. This is a live webinar. And so I'll take questions about what you have, and we'll be back in 1 or 2 minutes. Thanks. All right. Um, Here we go. Sorry, this question's. Okay, so let me answer this first question. By the way, if you ask questions, I won't show your name. If your name shows up in the questions, I won't show them because I know people want to make these questions. A lot of times they want to make them private. So I won't do that. So let me go to the first question because it's a fairly long one. Okay, let me see here. Let me do this a different way. Well, here we go. Sorry, I'm going to do this a different way. I apologize. Okay, so this question says, hello and happy holidays. Thank you for producing these webinars. I was a direct hire as a temporary attorney at a major law firm. I was harassed by another attorney and I stayed silent. I've had a bad experience in the past at a federal agency or incident when I complained or filed a grievance. Incident I found unbelievable that the law firm was that a partner refused to speak to me. I always dress professionally in dark business suits. I work regular hours. I'm a practicing Muslim and wears a hijab. The partner who created my department is an American Jew. Whenever I'd say hello or good morning while passing the hallways, he ignored me. I never reported these sites to anyone in human resources. I was subsequently laid off by a project manager who was a female and a minority. I left quietly because I didn't want to be blacklisted or blackballed in my career. Talk about prejudice. I face it daily and it's my reality. Okay, so let me see, is there a question here? Yeah, I'm sorry that happened to you. I don't think that is a good thing. As someone that's not a person in your situation, it's very difficult for me to comment about and what you face because I certainly couldn't possibly. I've never had anything like that happen to me due to religion or my sex and stuff. Unfortunately, I'm not maybe the best person to comment on it. But what I will tell you is I'll tell you some things that I think, and again, I have written a book about diversity inside of law firms and some of the challenges that people from diverse backgrounds have faced. And it's on the website of BCG. So it might be helpful for you might enjoy reviewing it because I spent several months writing about this. And again, I can't identify as a white male anywhere near with the things that you've gone through. And I'm sorry, but I would be nice if I had experienced some things, but I have experienced some of the things you're mentioning. A lot of times when I would say hi to partners or good morning or smile at people when I was young and they wouldn't acknowledge me, I would often take it personally. And many times they're just not paying attention or it's just how it works. It depends on where you're at, but if you're in a big city, a lot of times people are very impersonal. I wouldn't take it personally. You may, but the other thing I would say is because you're a temporary attorney, not a full-time associate and so forth, sometimes there is some discrimination against people that aren't in permanent roles as opposed to contract roles, regardless of their background. And so I would also say that, and I don't know that a law firm would blackball you in your career for that. But if you didn't report any of this, I can't tell you whether or not that was the right or wrong thing to do because I wasn't there and I'm not in your position. But one thing I would say that it may be helpful is there is a lot of law firms to hire people from different backgrounds, whether it's someone that, whatever the race or your religious affiliations. There is a lot of pressure because the law firms want to reflect what's going on in society. Hollywood, for example, has done very well with that. If you watch television shows, you'll notice that they've started putting anytime in most shows, there's a lot of diversity now, and then they'll start automatically putting a lot of times people that are diverse into authority roles. So if you choose a judge or who the boss is, or in most shows, they'll always try to have a lot of diversity there and actually lean on the side of diversity because they want to promote that message that people in power are of diverse backgrounds. And so I do think society is changing and working very hard at that. And I think that I don't want to underscore what you're saying, but I think that I think that the tide is definitely turning in favor, or not in favor, but towards making that sort of thing more favorable. So I think, but what I would say is I certainly, when I was practicing law, experienced a lot of slights like you're talking about. And I think everyone does. I think that I've seen things that were completely inappropriate, and I think everyone has. And so you just have to understand that not every environment's perfect. And in most cases, I think if you are having a hard time and really bad things are done, then you need to consider ways to hopefully address them at the employer you're with. Again, I apologize it happened to you. And again, this is a very sensitive topic for a lot of people, and I can certainly understand why. And there is prejudice in all levels of society, but there's also, I think there's a pretty concerted effort to try to fix a lot of that. But I'm not an expert in this, and I'm certainly not someone that can effectively, shouldn't be commenting on the challenges that the Muslim woman faces because I'm not of that background, and it would be almost paternalistic and narcissistic of me to do. I hope that advice I gave helps. I would just say that the most important thing is to do your best, and hopefully this stuff won't keep happening. I do think that there's a lot of positive changes that have been made. Okay, let's see here in society. But again, I'm not someone that can comment effectively on this because I'm not of the same background. Okay, let's see. Do you have any advice on how to learn the politics of the new firm I set myself up for success? I'm starting as opposed to associate at a new firm as a third-year associate. It's my first time laterally. Yes, I do. So one of the things that some of the best things criticize. So a couple of things that are very important, I think, when you're starting any new firm is to be very careful about having any criticisms or complaints. One of the things that happens is anytime you start a position at a new firm, you're going into a new environment where things are going to be done differently and where you may not be used to the way that things have been done in the way things are done at that firm. So every firm is different. Some firms may have different types of expectations than wherever you're coming from. So if you came from a smaller firm and you're going into a bigger firm, there may be some different types of expectations. If you're going to a smaller firm, there may be different expectations as well. So I would be very careful about complaining about any differences or criticizing or doing anything when you start out, and just being very affable and listening a lot. So you want to listen to things that people are saying, and you want to pick up on the politics and not get too involved. When I say criticize, there's going to be people, anytime you start a new position, a lot of times the first people that will appear as your friends and at your door and at your lunches and stuff, I don't know how that works. There'll be two sets of people. So one will be people that the firm may have asked to mentor you or talk to you or show you the ropes, which will be typically they're people that the firm likes. And then there'll be other people that show up that have bad opinions about the firm and are going to be leaving and are going to try to turn you, and they're looking for friends and things. And so those are the kind of people that you probably want to avoid. And you want to be nice to them because you don't want to upset them, because then they'll talk badly about you, but you want to avoid. And when I say avoid, you have to be very careful about allowing people to turn you against your new job. So you've obviously gone to a new firm for a reason, and you do want to avoid people that are going to try to make you feel badly about where you're working. They will complain about the hours, they'll complain about the partners, they'll make fun of partners, and none of that helps you. Looking at people in a negative light, thinking negatively about your firm, thinking those sorts of things doesn't do you any good. You want to think positively about your firm. And so the only way to do that is really to surround yourself with people that are doing well there, and to avoid people that aren't doing well and are having issues, because those people will be gone. And if you stick around with them, they'll take you with them. So that's the first piece of advice. People can influence a lot of things. The next thing is you want to work very hard. You want to impress people with your work. And that means going the extra mile, making sure that your work is turned in. Many times, especially younger trainers are very eager to turn in work very quickly, but resist that temptation and don't turn in things too quickly. Don't take on more work than you can handle, meaning don't try to do more than at some point, if you're getting way too much work and it's impossible to keep up with it, then you need to start telling people you can't work on things, even if they feel like it's upsetting to you. And then the other thing is you want to, as a third year, You want to spend a lot of time observing things. And before you start talking, offering your opinions, you want to start observe and spend a lot of time observing and understand what's going on, and just be very nice to everyone and affable. That's the best piece of advice I would give you. The other thing is I would avoid news. So meaning news about the firm. I wouldn't get interested in that. I wouldn't get interested in negative news about people you're working with. I wouldn't get interested in competing salaries and moving. I wouldn't even think about moving for a couple of years. I've been there as a third-year associate. I would plan on being there for several years, because you don't want to start moving, finding reasons to move. A lot of times people will move. I had this instance years ago where I was with a recruiter from our firm, and she asked me to go with her to meet with this attorney for dinner, and so I did. And I sat down, and this attorney had moved to a firm as a second year or something, and so now they were maybe a fourth year, and they were very upset and wanted to move. And the reason they were upset was because the firm was no longer paying for parking in the building, and we're making them park across the street and paying for parking there. And these petty reasons for being mad at your firm and leaving are not doing you much good. The idea is, as a third-year associate, you want to think about committing to wherever you're going. You want to think about what you can do to stay. You want to not find reasons to not like the firm. You want to find reasons to like the firm. If you find reasons to not like the firm, it will show. And it'll show on how I'm sure you've been in relationships with people or employers or people that you've employed where you can tell when there's something like some switch has been switched, and the person goes from really liking or working hard or liking you to the opposite. And you don't want to allow anybody to flip your switch. You need to stay committed to wherever you're going. And again, if you're moving for a reason and you want to, those are some of the things. The other thing I'd recommend too is that as a third year, assuming you're committed to practicing law the rest of your career, these people that are at your firm will go to the in-house counsel, they'll go to other firms, they'll do all sorts of things where they could be called upon to be your recommenders, or you may want them for a job later, who knows? You want to make sure that you do whatever you can to impress the people that you're working with and do a really good job. And that would be my biggest piece of advice, because that can help you throughout your entire career. Thanks for knowing the amount of time you need to actually polish and prepare a memo or brief. I think it's hard for folks to set how many hours it actually takes. Sure. I think, yes, the thing is, everything that you write, typically you write a draft of it, but then you spend a lot of time perfecting the language, shortening it, removing things, writing better subject headings, all that sort of thing, whether it's a memo or a brief. And you do in a large law firm is never going to, if it's done well, is never going to come out as a perfect or anywhere near perfect in the beginning, because many times there's better ways of looking into things. There's better ways of shortening what you're saying and making it more readable. Sometimes your conclusions may not be supported and everything. So yeah, most people that are good at this stuff will spend a lot more time on this stuff than, that. Okay, what can you do to become an associate the partners like so you can give them more work? So the biggest way to become an associate the partners like so you can give them more work is typically going to be to work hard on their assignments, to give work back that they can actually use that makes them look good to their clients, to not question the need for the work, to allow most of the time. So you may be researching something and feel like you need to explain it in great detail. Partners a lot of times don't like that in person, and when you're meeting with them or something, they can pretty much, you could give them a 20-page memo that you worked on for 4 weeks, and they could look at it in 5 minutes and know the conclusions without spending a lot of time. So you don't need to explain things in a lot of detail, even though it seems like it's that important to you. They can pick up on it very quickly because they've been doing a lot longer than you. But in order to become liked by the partners, you need to seem open to taking work. So a lot of times they'll know that if they call you and ask you to do something, that you'll do it. So they like that. They like it when they see you prioritize their work. People like to feel important. If someone calls you on a Friday and says, would you do this? And you sound excited and you say, sure, I'll have it for you Sunday morning. Is that okay? And they say, sure, there's no rush. You can have it on Monday. People like feeling important like that. So that's one thing. But doing a good job on the work is important. Finding things that other people don't. taking it seriously, being enthusiastic, and being enthusiastic is important. So think about when you give people work, whether it's if you give somebody work and they don't seem excited about it, that's going to upset you. And so people want to seem they want you to seem excited and like you like it, and that you're putting in extra effort and all that sort of thing. So all that is extremely important. And if you're able to do a good job with that sort of thing, meaning the enthusiasm and the attention to detail, and then they'll like it. Just if I call up someone and I say, can you have this pizza? And they say, oh yeah, we'll do what we can. Try to have it there in an hour or two. Is that okay? You're not going to want to do business with a pizza place anymore. If the person says, no problem, we're going to make it. Would you like it like this? I saw you did it like this last time. We'll have it there in 25 minutes. We're excited. Thanks for thinking of us. And all that sort of thing. You're going to want to do business with that person, that pizza parlor, opposed to the other one. So that's just how it's the same thing with just getting work as an associate. So that's one of the things. And then the other thing that you can do, people will give you more work when they see you're enthusiastic about it. Enthusiasm for the subject matter, enthusiasm for working with that person, make the person believing that you like them, that you like the work, that you're grateful for getting the work, that you're excited to be working there. And all that stuff is not easy to do sometimes for some people, but if people believe that, they're going to want to give you more work. There's a lot of good questions today. Thank you, everyone who's asking these questions. These are great questions. Okay, what's the best way for a junior associate or mid-sized law firm to work their way up to a more prestigious law firm? So the best way to work your way up to a more prestigious law firm is to be in a practice area, the first thing that's in demand. And if you're in a practice area where there's not a lot of people in that practice area that becomes in demand, then it's not that hard to work up to a more prestigious law firm. So when the economy is very good, if you're a junior associate at a mid-sized law firm and you're doing corporate or some sort of version of that, you shouldn't have too much trouble moving to a more prestigious law firm when that becomes very much in demand. If it used to be IP litigation and patent, this is that kind of practice area. But the practice area is really the most important thing. Now, many times it's location based. So the practice area is one thing, meaning if you're in a practice area that becomes in demand, the other way to do it. So for example, if bankruptcy suddenly becomes a very popular practice area in a mid-sized law firm and there's not enough bankruptcy associates, you can do that. Now you can't always track what's going to happen in the economy, but right now it does look like the country is going into what I think it's probably already in a recession. And because of that, there's going to be certain practice areas that will do well, and there's certain practice areas that won't do well. But if you're at a mid-sized firm, really it's practice area based. Now, another thing is if you're at a mid-sized firm in New York City or in Los Angeles, for example, and you want to move to a more prestigious firm, one of the ways you can often do that is by moving markets. So anytime you're in a market where there's a high concentration of attorneys, which is large markets in Houston, Dallas, Los Angeles, Miami, all these, whatever big market you can think of, it's always going to be harder to move to a more prestigious law firm if there's a high concentration of people. But if you take your same skills and you move to a smaller market, then you can often move to a more prestigious law firm. So I have instances where there's AmLaw 100 law firms all over the Midwest in smaller cities and stuff, and they often don't have large offices, but people can often get hired there that couldn't get hired in a major office of those same firms because of the fact that there's just not a high concentration of people. So it's all about who you're competing with and that. But typically, if you're at a mid-sized firm, one of the things I would recommend is to be in a more specialized you are in your practice area, the better. So if you type of work you do, the more specialized you are, the more likely you are to get into a larger law firm. Large law firms tend to have specialists, and mid-sized to smaller firms will often have generalists. So if you go into Madison, Wisconsin, for example, and you look at a big firm there, or all the firms there, they're not going to have, their attorneys might do M&A, but they're also going to do general corporate, and they're going to do, and again, this is not a criticism of Madison, it's just the size of the market. They're going to do all these different types of corporate. Whereas if you took that same firm and you put it in New York City, they would only do M&A, or they would only do securities or something. In mid-sized and smaller markets, people tend to be more generalist. In mid-sized firms, they tend to be more generalist to specialists. Large law firms and the most prestigious law firms have specialists, if that helps. Okay, it's a lot of good questions. These are great questions. I love these questions. Okay, let's hear. A mature market attorney. 14 of my 17 years was an examining trademark attorney at the USPTO. Generally, this experience is beneficial, but only with approximately 1 to 4 years. Many new aspects of trademark law become important. I've not learned or used them. What is the best way to catch up, otherwise making me more marketable? Okay. I'm assuming that you're. Oh, I'm a trademark. I'm assuming you're still at the USPTO. I don't know. I can't tell, but that's okay. So the best way to catch up on this stuff is probably I don't want to be out talk down to you, but obviously CLE seminars and things would be helpful. As a trademark examining attorney, I don't know what office you're in, but you can go to a law firm with that skills. It would probably not be in a major market. It would probably be in a smaller market. But again, you might be able to, but a law firm could help you. But to become more marketable and in that practice area, the nice thing about trademark law is there's not a lot of jobs typically. And there's always firms, if you look on BCG, that are seeking senior trademark attorneys and that sort of thing. And what I would recommend is, in order to become more marketable, I think you would try to go to a firm in a smaller market that needs someone that's senior like you, that's having a hard time finding people with your experience. The reason I say smaller market is a large market is going to have all sorts of people in law firms and things that don't have business, that are senior, that are going to be interested in someone with coming directly from a law firm. The other thing you could do too is you could probably go in-house. There's lots of in-house companies that are constantly churning out trademarks. That could be helpful. An unusual suggestion, but one I'll bring up that may work for you, is sometimes internationally, there's a need for people with your skills to do that type of work, meaning China, places like that. And you can often, sometimes you can get remote related work. The other thing you could do too is you could try to find contract related work, remote contract related work, where you would get those skills as well. That's another suggestion, but that's how I would go about getting that experience, if that makes sense. Okay, this person asked, is it better to be single if I'm working in a large law firm? It depends on who you're with. Just ask this question because it's kind of an interesting question. This person says, is it better to be single if you're working in a large law firm? It depends on the kind of partner that you're with. I don't know. I think everyone needs a support mechanism, whether it's having a significant other or lots of close friends. And so I don't know that it is better to be single. I think that many times the demands of working in a law firm can interfere with your family. And so you need to definitely have the right type of person that you're with. And there's lots of couples that I've seen that have done very well, where they're both attorneys in large law firms. And that can be very helpful. Okay, what's the right balance for working as hard as you can, but not letting yourself burn out? So this is a good question. Someone's talking about burning out, and I think I'll just kind of conclude with this. The issue with burning out is you only burn out if you're doing work you don't enjoy. So you need to be enjoying working in a law firm, and it's not going to be fun. Your first 3 to 5 years is always going to be an apprenticeship. No one talks about really loving being a resident in a hospital. No one talks about it's not necessarily going to always be fun. But the big thing about working in a law firm is no one is ever going to tell you to slow down, because it's not in their best interest to do. So you need to know when to slow down. And that means you have to have some rules. Your rules could be, I go to church every week, or I exercise every day, or I meditate once a day. You have to have some rules and some things that you use to protect your sanity and yourself. And so that's one of the things I'd recommend. And then the thing is, large partners in large law firms aren't burned out. They get strength from it. And so what are they doing that's different? So you have to watch and get role models. And because a lot of partners in large law firms very much enjoy what they're doing, and they get power from it. And so those are things that you need to recommend and understand. And if you understand that, you're much more likely to do better. And so you need to look at what are people doing that are successful. And most people that are successful are probably getting strength from the environment that they're in. Okay, I think that's about it. I certainly appreciate everyone being in this webinar today. I will be back next week. This was not a well-announced webinar today. I don't think so I appreciate everyone being here anyway. And thank you for all the questions. These are great questions. And I'll talk to everyone again next week. Thanks.